Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to share with you Ark's best small carnivores. And just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps the channel. In at number 5 is the Mantis. Now this thing really is a Ark harvester's dream. This thing is absolutely insane for any kind of harvesting. But you may wonder by its appearance, how is this thing actually going to harvest? Well, the Mantis itself doesn't actually harvest anything, but it can wield any kind of melee weapons which are used for harvesting or combat. This is actually a very viable creature for doing the Manticore on Scorched Earth. And as you can see here, this thing is absolutely tearing through this Diplo, and it can tear through many other creatures as well. But on Raasclark, I mainly use these swords for getting mutton from killing sheep, which are just smaller creatures. They're a lot easier to kill, they're a lot quicker to kill than some larger creatures. I probably wouldn't take this thing against larger carnivores, but it definitely can do that. In terms of harvesting, this thing is absolutely insane for doing any kind of metal runs, as you can simply put picks in its hands and it will just hammer right through all of that metal. It is also great for gathering fiber if you use sickles, and even thatch, wood, stone and flint, etc, etc. The lists just simply go on with this thing, and it is definitely an essential creature and also very small and easy to take around. In at number 4 is the Thyla. This thing is a creature that every Ark player should tame, and it is actually very accessible and not too rare. The only thing about it is this thing does spawn in the Redwoods, and the Redwoods is not a biome you want to be in for that long, as it is very harsh and hostile. Also, definitely beware when you're looking to tame one of these things. These things will be up in the trees, and if you're not careful, these things will simply pounce onto you and end your day. And that is something you definitely don't want. But once tamed, you have yourself an absolute beast that can climb up walls and vertical surfaces, and that deals so much damage. This thing is an absolute beast when it comes to damage, and on top of that, it has a bleed ability as well, which means this thing can deal a percentage of a creature's health in damage over the bleed abilities period. Which means no matter the health of the creature, it is still going to do an insane amount of damage to it. Sadly, this doesn't work for bosses with the Thyla. That is something the Deinonychus has, but it is still absolutely insane for basically every creature on the Ark map. But also, the Thyla is a great travel mount as well. This thing can traverse any map with absolute ease, and thanks to its wall climbing abilities, this thing can scale any landscape no problem. In at number 3 is the Megalosaurus. Now you may think this thing only spawns on Arboration, but that is wrong and a common misconception from some Ark players. The Megalosaurus spawns in pretty much any cave that you can find on pretty much any map. And these things are definitely a lot more useful in Arboration, but they are still a very viable caving creature and a very great creature overall. In the day, these things are just groggy and pretty much useless. But in the night, these things really do shine. Unless you are trying to attack Microraptors, that is always going to go wrong. The Megalosaurus is also equipped with a wealth of abilities, one of which that you can see here. It will grab small creatures in its mouth, and then it will just drain all of their health right down. This is very useful when you have loads of little pests running after you, and I have no doubt this thing can easily kill alphas. It's just I didn't manage to kill one because it ran straight off of the cliff. Ark Dino AI definitely is not the smartest. The Megalosaurus actually does a very reasonable amount of damage, like I just said, and it can tear through pretty much everything, including alphas if I could actually kill one. But the main thing about this thing is that it is really small and compatible and easy to take around. It is actually a reasonably good travel mount as well, as are most of the creatures. Pretty much actually all of the creatures on this list are really great travel mounts. And yes, there is definitely a benefit to having small carnivores. In a PvP situation as well, a smaller creature means you are more hidden, and this thing really does pack so much damage for its size. In at number 2 is the Deinonychus. Now this is probably the smallest creature on the list, and this thing probably packs the biggest punch out of most of the creatures on this list, except it isn't the most useful compared to the creature that is in the number 1 spot. But either way, the Deinonychus is an absolutely insane creature for dealing damage. It can latch onto large creatures and simply just tear them apart. Like the Thyla, this also uses the bleed ability, but unlike the Thyla, this bleed ability is going to work on bosses as well, which means this thing is absolutely insane, as bleeding abilities work on a percentage, not an actual amount of damage. So it is always going to take a certain percentage of health, that be if its health was 100 or 100 million, it is still going to deal that same amount of percentage, which is absolutely insane when you really think about it. But also, this thing is an absolutely insane travel mount as well. This thing is extremely versatile and has a lot of speed and agility. But namely, this thing can also climb up pretty much any wall and surface. Unlike the Thyla, it isn't going to walk up, it is just going to jump up it. This does take a bit of practice to actually learn, as it is a bit finicky, but once you've learnt it, this thing is extremely useful for doing any kind of travel, and also extremely fun. And that definitely does matter for a creature, that if you're going to want to use it, it has to be very enjoyable. And finally, in at number 1 is the Baryonyx. This thing is by far my favourite small carnivore in Ark. Yes, the Deinonychus is going to be better for fighting and traveling, but this thing just has a few things up its sleeve that really put it into first place for me. And also, this thing is actually a lot easier to tame than a Deinonychus. It doesn't require you to steal and literally raise a Deinonychus from a baby. So also, the Baryonyx tame is a lot less time consuming. If you didn't know already, the Baryonyx is the best creature for doing any kind of cave runs. This is literally a caver's dream. It is absolutely insane at getting into caves, which is really important. This thing fits into pretty much every single cave in Ark, which is partly why it is so useful. Also, underwater, it has a secret sea attack ability, which is a spin, which will stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon. This means that it is actually very useful for doing underwater caves as well. And on a map like the island, there are 2 underwater caves that are necessary for the game's completion. And considering that the Baryonyx isn't even an underwater creature in the first place, it is really great that it is actually so good at dealing with water, as the Ark Ocean is not a very friendly place, and sometimes passive taming a Basilo is an absolute pain, and it is definitely very time consuming no matter your settings. But there is still one major downside to the Bary, like I always say when I talk about the Bary, and that is that it does sadly spawn in the swamp, and the swamp is not good. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and also, did you agree with this list? If not, comment your top 5 in the comments down below, and I will see you all later. Bye.